Swami Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaaya Te Namaha. Yatha Dharika Shakti Ramakrishne Sthita Dheya Sarva Vidya Swarupam Tam Sharanam Pranamamyaham. Om Namah Shriya Adhirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Sachitrika Swarupaya Swami Namaha. The topic for this session is Be the Witness. And this and the next talk this afternoon, Be Attached. These are both statements that were made by Swami Vivekananda. So I'll be, of course, tying it in with that a little bit. But this idea of the witness is one of the most interesting and most important concepts that we have in Vedanta. The term itself, technical term, Sanskrit term, is sakshin. Sakshin or sakshi. Literally, it means somebody with eyes, but it doesn't mean with eyes. We have no way of expressing these things except through these metaphors with the senses. We talk about seeing God. We don't see God with these eyes. So the sakshin will be the witness from a very pure standpoint. Not like an individual who's a witness, who really may even tell lies or have his own spin on different things, but a perfect witness that won't add anything or just won't be affected by anything, won't judge anything, will just be the pure observer. The drashta. We have this very important text, Drishya Viveka, the discrimination between the seer and the seen. And we'll get to all of this, but the seer has nothing to do with the individuality or even ego or anything like that. It's just this pure witnessing consciousness. The term sakshin sometimes will be kind of a capital S term and sometimes a lowercase, or even witness. Capital W witness or small w witness. We'll find the same term used to describe the supreme reality and also as the individual observer within who's watching everything. When we read the Gita, for example, that Sri Krishna refers to himself as the Sakshi. Prabhu, Sakshi, with all of these terms meaning God, so can have that meaning. And it can also, just from an individual point of view, or almost psychological point of view, that aspect of ourselves that is watching, that is unchanged, unaffected, peaceful, calm, all of that, perfect witness. The witness doesn't add anything. There's a story that they tell in India about the tremendous memory that some of these pundits have. And there was this one pundit, this was during the British period. He didn't understand a word of English, but he happened to be somewhere, sitting someplace where this fight took place between two Englishmen. And they're yelling back and forth and everything, and they come to blows and one kills the other one. So they want to know, did anybody witness what took place? Somebody said that this pundit was there. So they called him in and said, did you hear what took place? And he said, yes. He said, can you tell me what they said? They repeated verbatim everything in English, not understanding a single word. Now this is the perfect witness, right? Because he's not invested in it. He won't change anything. It doesn't mean anything. So this is a little bit this idea of the witness. So this concept of the witness is a very slippery concept. It doesn't fit very easily into any one single category. As I say, so it'll be everywhere from the individual self, higher self, just the higher mind watching, to this ultimate witness of the universe. Some will say that this is a definition of God, personal God. God sees everything that we do, hears everything we do. That would be that idea of the witness also. sakshat, we have this term also. It's something that is just undeniable, immediate, just before our very eyes. So this Guru Sakshat Param Brahma is this the Supreme Brahman. We can't doubt it. So we have this concept that everything that can be perceived has to have not just a perceiver, but something behind. It's this pure witness that is watching everything. So I want to go through this afternoon some of these different concepts, see how we can reconcile the different points of view so that we see how it's the same phenomenon at work, whether we take it from a very spiritual, high, even devotional point of view, that this is our definition of God, personal God watching us, or we don't believe in any of that. We're very strict Advaitins, following the path of knowledge, and we just want to locate that pure self, which is not engaged in anything, but it's simply the silent witness of everything. Then, second part, or the end part of this talk, will deal with what I think is the most important aspect, and that is the statement, be the witness. What does it mean to be the witness? This is a certain type of spiritual attitude that we take. Not very different from what has been popularized so much by the mindfulness movement. Just watching everything that we're doing without judging or commenting or anything, just learning to live in the present, that way of being the witness. Now, if we analyze this concept, there is some psychological underlying feeling that I think everybody has, that we have a certain permanence, we have a certain identity, we have a certain thread that goes through every moment of our life, which makes us feel that we are the same person we were, even when we were small children. And it's remarkable that sometimes if we see pictures of ourselves when we were little children, we will hardly recognize or can imagine how we were once that size, that age and everything. And if we analyze the different stages that we go through, the different types of ideas that we have, sometimes very radical change. Sometimes we go through a period very, very shy, period we can't talk to anybody, then we become very extroverted. Politically, we may lean in one direction and then we may change to another. From a spiritual point of view, we may have no spiritual interest whatsoever. Something happens, and the next thing you know, we're joining this group and that group and everything else. And yet, through all of these changes, we feel that I'm the same person. That was me. And even the language that we use shows us that I used to be so shy, and now I can sit before all of you people and expound without feeling anything. The same I. What accounts for that? What is this thread? We have this very nice Sanskrit term, sutratman. The self as a thread. This thread, we can say, goes through each and every being in the universe, but it goes through each and every moment of time for each and every individual. Something that makes us feel continuity. And in Vedanta, it's explained in terms of this witness being the only thing that's unchanging. The only single constant factor in this whole dream of a life that we have. The only thing that's always watching, is never vacant. Even when we're sleeping, when we're dreaming, how is it we remember our dreams? Because the same witness that is watching this dream is watching us in the waking state. And we can even see when we wake up in the midst of a dream, we can even observe. And we don't feel it's odd somehow, but it's very odd how that body that we were in disappears and now we're lying in bed. But somehow the same I just immediately flows from the dreamed body to the waking body. What is that I? What is the real sense of that I, real source of that I? If we analyze and observe, it'll be the witness that has been watching everything, watching us throughout the whole lifetime. Now, is it an I or is it a he or a she? If there's nothing personal in it, Do we want to take that as myself, or do we want to take that as the divine dwelling within? That's why I say it's a slippery concept. It can be understood in many different ways. So we have this psychological feeling. Then there is almost a universal feeling, at least among those who belong to devotional religions, devotional faiths, that there's a higher being that hears our prayers and maybe even knows all of our thoughts. There's nothing hidden to that higher being. As I say, it's very devotional. We may feel there's a lot of projection going on, that it's just our own higher self, we're projecting outward. But anyhow, this seems to be a common phenomenon to many of the different traditions that we have in the world. We even see with small children something like an imaginary friend that they'll have. We even see with people who suffer from paranoia this phenomenon that there's somebody always watching them. Now, could this also be a projection from that internal witness that they think is something outside of themselves? Paranoia is a horrible thing. That there are people who think the CIA are after them. No matter where they go, there's no place they can hide. They'll always know. They're always watching them. So this is a very distorted version, perhaps, of the same phenomenon, that we feel that whatever we think, whatever we do, nothing is hidden. Now, it may be that we know it's hidden to everybody else, but it's not hidden to me, to myself. And is that really the I, or is it some higher power within? So it all goes back to this idea of this witness. Where does it fall? Do we want to put it on the side of God dwelling within, or just this higher self? We can't really say. I mentioned Swami this morning, one of the disciples of Swami. He used to say, if you take a pair of scissors and you cut a piece of paper with it, and you say, which of the two blades does the cutting? We can't say. It's one of those kind of in-between type of concepts that we have. So we'll see that for the jnani, those who follow the path of knowledge, it can almost be the higher self, the very highest level of the self, which is just watching. For the devotee, the same sakshin will be what's called the antaryami, the inner controller, the inner guide, that is God dwelling within as the personal God. This is one of the important distinctions between Vedanta and some other schools, that generally the personal God is considered to be the God in heaven, God dwelling someplace without. The Vedanta, the transcendent aspect of God will be the impersonal, and the immanent aspect of God will be the personal. God dwelling within the heart, taking the shape of the heart, being seen through the prism of the heart, will be the personal God. So for some, higher mind looking at the lower mind, for other, the divine presence of God, personal God, all of these different ways of looking at it confirm on some level that there's something at play here. There's something real here, which we're calling the witness. We don't know exactly how to explain it or where to put it. It could be that it's one and the same. If the ultimate truth is Soham, the ultimate truth is Tatvamasi, thou art that, then this witness, the higher self within, and this witness which is God dwelling within, should be one and the same also. So there should be a way for us to understand all of this in a very unified way, so that we can see these different points of view are not contradictory. Now, there's a school of thought that will say that this witness is nothing but the mind. We have in Western philosophy a very famous philosopher, Immanuel Kant. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of him. He was actually studied very much by many of our direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna who went to these Christian missionary schools and were interested in Western philosophy. So you'll see that Swamiji and some of the others, they were very familiar with Kant and Hegel and some of the German philosophers. They were commonly taught in those days, and along with the John Stuart Mill and the English philosophers. Now, the way Kant explained this was that every time we have a thought, or at least have a perception, it's accompanied by another thought, I know. So not only do we know something, but we know that we know it. So it'll just be this mind, the reflexive nature of the mind. This was sort of his way of explaining this probably uniquely human quality, that we're self-conscious beings. Animals will do things. Animals have actual development of mind and senses in some animals is much higher than we have. They can recognize hundreds of different smells and tastes and things like that we can only do a few. This is all the functioning of senses in the mind. But this buddhi, this intelligence, this ability to reflect, to be self-reflective, to not only know something but to be aware, seems to belong to the human race. We can make an argument for a slight of this within the orangutans and gorillas and things. There's been a lot of work. I read something recently that this Coco, was it the name? This one gorilla that was taught so many words and everything, and seemed to be able to respond and love and do all of this. Somebody was saying that, yes, the development that is probably equivalent to the stage of like a 2-year-old child. There's nothing on that same scale. So practically a unique attribute of what it means to be a human being. So we have this ability to reflect, not only to do things, but to watch ourselves doing things. Now, is this what it means to be the witness? Maybe, but maybe not also. And let me give one example. Suppose we're sitting alone in a room, and we like to sing, but we're not singers, and we've never sung in public. We're too shy. So we think that there's nobody watching us, so we start singing, and then we notice that somebody else is in the room that we hadn't seen before. All of a sudden, we see ourselves singing. Right? We become what we call self-conscious. Now, we shouldn't confuse this with self-conscious in the spiritual sense. Self-conscious means embarrassed. Right? Now, is that the witnessing aspect of the mind? No. The witnessing aspect of the mind is that which sees the embarrassment, which sees the self-consciousness. It's not the mind itself has become self-conscious. The witness is beyond the mind. There's no functioning going on there. So it'll be something even a little deeper than that. So it's really not on the mind level, but do we want to strictly keep it to what we'll call the jivatman level, or the higher self? Self within. We won't use this capital W with it, till the lowercase. Now I want to go to a very, very important illustration, allegory that we find in the Kathopanishad that talks about the chariot and the charioteer and the rider in the chariot. This is very, very significant with this question of the witness. The illustration involves a chariot with horses, with reins, with a road, and with a driver, and with the passenger. Okay? So the charioteer, Sarati, will be buddhi, will be the intellect. Because the intellect makes decisions, which way to turn, this and that. The mind carries out the decisions, so that'll be the reins. The horses will be the senses, because they're the ones who have to watch the road. And the road will be the sense objects. Now, the Kathopanishad verse says that the Atman is the passenger. Now, the passenger does not do anything. The passenger, only by the presence of the passenger, everything else takes place. So the passenger is only watching everything. So we can assume that this passenger will be the sakshan, will be the witness. Now, Shankaracharya says that the passenger within is not the Atman, but the Jivatman. Now, is this just, what do they say? Straws. What's the expression? Splitting hairs. Okay, splitting hairs. Are we making it, is this too fine a distinction? Does it amount to nothing? Why does he say, because the Sanskrit says Atmanam, is the driver, the rider, the passenger to be the Atman. Now, Shankaracharya says no, because as long as he's inside the chariot, he has some connection with the body, the mind, and the senses. So he said this is the definition of jiva. The jiva is the Atman who seems to be in apparent connection with the body, mind, and senses. So he says this is the jiva. So now that we say that this is jiva, that's the individual self. Is the individual self this witness that we have within. Now, if we analyze who is the passenger inside the chariot, we find that the passenger inside the chariot doesn't have to be inside the chariot. He can leave. Right? He can buy a new chariot. He can keep his driver. He can keep his horses if he wants. But if he wants to go somewhere, it'll be a new chariot. The fact that this jiva can go from one to another and can even be without any chariot at all means that the jiva is the Atman, but we're calling it a jiva because it's got this identification with that particular chariot. This is the only real distinction that we have. And when the jiva within, which is us, we are the jiva within, when we can realize our freedom from this chariot, that we have an existence that transcends it, that we're not limited by it, we don't have to be attached to it, then we realize the true nature of the self is the Atman. So from this point of view, we can say that the sakshan, or the witness, is the pure self, the higher self. Once it realizes its true nature. So right now, this jiva, individual self, is in a state of bondage, not because the doors are locked in the chariot, only because it thinks it can't get out. Because the sense of identification is so strong. But if this is the silent observer of everything. He can look out the window and see where we're going, can watch everything, is watching. And has so much faith in the charioteer and everything that it doesn't even give instructions for anything. As soon as he gets in, then the driver knows exactly where to go. Okay. Now, so, everyone follow me so far? So far, it's pretty straightforward. No need to bring in God or anything like that. So, just make up of the mind and how things work. But we will find that even for the great jnani, Swami Vivekananda was a great jnani, even though he was also a great devotee of God, we'll find that he'll refer to this witness in terms that we usually reserve for personal God. And as I said before, even in Gita, that Sri Krishna, when he's giving all the qualities and characteristics of Ishvara, that one of these will be Sakshi. So he says, Gatir Bharta Prabhu Sakshi Nivasa Sharanam Sure. All of these things, I am the goal, I am the support, I am the Lord, I am the abode, the refuge, the friend, and I am the witness. So who really is this character who's inside of the chariot that we're just riding around and everything? Is it really personal? Is it really God who comes in the form of the self, who gets fooled and becomes the witness? Or God in disguise? It's another nice way of looking at the jiva. Who is the jiva? God comes in disguise, puts on a mask. He puts on the mask of humanity. This is also an Advaitic point of view. If the Brahman itself is entered into everything, then each and every individual is Brahman. The self within is nothing but that higher reality. This actually was Ramakrishna's living vision. He used to say, whether you know it or not, each one of you is divine. Tumi jano or nahi jano, tumi ram. He used to say, whether you know it or not, doesn't matter whether you know it or not. Of course, this is to the male disciples who are Rama. So he used to say, I see in every woman I see only Sita, in every man I see only Rama. Sometimes I see only the Divine Mother dwelling within. He's looking at what we would call the Jiva, or what the Jnani would call the Atman. He's saying, I see only God. So this is a higher type of vision. So we have to somehow account for this. Why in the literature, sacred literature, do we find that this witness is not explained simply in these psychological terms, in terms of the higher mind and all of that? Again, chapter 13 in Gita, this is the Kshetrajna chapter, the knower of the field. Now, this is also exactly what we have in the witness. The Kshetrajna, the field and the knower of the field. The field will mean everything that's an object of consciousness, and the knower of the field will be the witness. So, when Arjuna wants to know who is this witness, what is the answer that Sri Krishna gives to him? Anybody remember? It says, Kshetrajnam Prabhimam Buddhi Sarva Kshetreshu Bharata. No me to be the witness. He doesn't say it's your higher self. He says, no me to be the witness. That means Sri Krishna in the form of Ishvara, or however we want to say, the personal God, Bhagavan, but it'll be this Sakshi with a capital S. It's very interesting. It takes us a little bit by surprise. That what is our definition of God? God is that being which dwells within, is to be the witness, to be within all bodies, within all individuals, that I am the witness within all of them. So, how do we reconcile these two points of view? Do we want to say the witness is either the higher self, the Atman, in conjunction with the body, mind, the senses, all of that, or the Lord Himself dwelling within the heart, hearing our prayers, maybe even answering them, maybe giving us strength and courage, that source of joy and bliss that the great sages find when they have the higher type of experience. One of the ways, and I want to kind of use this as the main theme of this talk, one of the ways of understanding this is from two verses that we find in Mundaka Upanishad and also some other Upanishads. There's this Dwa Suparna. This is a very, very famous verse. And this is something that I only discovered recently. That the first verse is actually a quote from the Rig Veda. And the second verse is almost a translation of the first verse. So one of them is really, the Upanishads do that. They quote some verses that belong to a much older period, the Samhita period. So this is one of those verses, a very important verse. So these two beautiful birds are resting on the same tree, and one of them eats the fruit that is sometimes sweet and is sometimes bitter, and the other one simply watches without eating any fruit. So this is that verse. This tree will be this tree of the body. So this human body. The lower bird we can say is the jiva, higher bird we might want to say is the witness. Kshetrajna. But we have to withhold judgment. We'll find out who the Upanishad says this higher verse is. So Swamiji, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, Swamiji turns this into a whole parable in his morning session. He says that this lower bird is hopping from branch to branch and eating the fruit on the tree, and sometimes the fruit is very sweet, and the bird is very happy. But as soon as this bird eats a bitter fruit, then it starts to question things. And it looks up and he sees the other bird is at the top of the tree. And this other bird is very calm. Anashnan, it says, not eating anything. Very calm, very majestic, just watching, very peaceful. And the lower bird feels some sense of attraction to the higher bird. So it jumps a little higher and then forgets and starts eating the fruit again. And when it gets a very bitter fruit, we get a bitter experience in life. And then we look upward or inward and hops a little higher. Now, Swami gives an explanation that goes beyond what we find in the Upanishads. Very beautiful, beautiful interpretation. He says, as the bird gets higher and higher, and its desire to become one, or to have the presence or the company of that higher bird, it starts to feel its individuality melt away. And when it gets just close enough, then it merges in that bird and realizes that it never was a separate bird to begin with. It was that higher bird from the very beginning, seeing a reflection of itself and thinking that it was something different and identifying with that reflection of itself. Very beautiful interpretation. If we think about it too much, we'll realize that it's also very difficult to understand. Very difficult to understand this play of Maya, how we are that higher bird, and we don't know it. We're assuming that life is meant just to eat the fruits, hoping that they're sweet, and when they're bitter, then we start to question things a little bit.
Do you have to have a bitter experience in order to see the higher self?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. Do we have to have bitter experiences to realize the higher self? I don't think so. But very, very often it is the case that does happen, because we have this complacency. There are some people who are very, very intelligent people, and they can observe others having bitter experiences without having to go through it themselves. They're very fortunate people like that. Yeah. Some people are born just with very good, some scholars are good karma, they don't have to go through too much. But there's another way of looking at it, that those who go through these very bitter experiences, that this is the grace of God. That they should take it that way, that this is what is turning their lives around, leading them to something higher. So when we have that school of thought, that we'll say that these are the blessings of the Lord, these bitter experiences, because they make us rethink things. They make us take life a little seriously and everything. So I won't say it's necessary for everyone, but sometimes these are the great teachers. These very hurtful, harmful, difficult experiences of life are the ones that have more effect on us. So that's why eating the sweet fruits, it doesn't do too much for the bird. It has to be the bitter fruits of life. Yeah.
In Gita study, the first chapter deals with Arjuna Vishada Yoga.
Yes.
Then the second chapter starts, the teaching starts,
Yes, he has to go through this period of being disconsolate. Yeah, in order for these teachings to take over. But I won't say it's universal. I'll say it's very common. Commonly it's the case. But if we're very, very thoughtful people, and if we have very good samskaras, that we may take the spiritual life automatically and not need that too much. I hope that no one has to go through too much of this.
Bitter experience, this happens to the faithful person. They could leave like a scar and damage and go away from that.
Yes. It's not that automatically everyone who has a bitter experience will turn to God. Some people become bitter and more bitter. Yeah. Yes.
Sometimes I feel like that, the God has given so much, and you're so grateful, and you feel like you don't deserve it, and yet you're getting so much that then you become introspective and see that it is God who is giving it to you, because I know that for sure I didn't earn it. And to me, just like a bad experience does it, sometimes a lot of good experiences, one after the other, also makes you thankful to God.
There are some very fortunate people who are like that. That everything that happened, they see it as in a very positive way, and feel everything is a blessing. Yeah, this is the grace of God. People have that. There's no question about that. Yeah.
Not only the grace of God, you are responsible for your own karma. This is the karma phala. You did a good karma somewhere, that is manifesting now. I buy $1 ticket lottery and make $1 million by winning. That is nothing but, we don't say luck, it is the manifestation of previous good karma right now.
Yeah, now grace of God, this is what the devotee will call good luck. And this is what the karma yogi will call hard work. So another one of these things, it's a phenomenon. We don't know exactly why some things happen. Different people have different types of explanations. Yeah. Now, I want to get to the second verse here, because to me, this is the significant part. The second verse, the verse that follows is Dvasuparna, this very famous really quote from the Rig Veda, gives what I think is the commentary on this verse by the Upanishad itself. Now this says, Samane Varikshe, so on the same tree, Purusho Nimagna, the individual, Purusha here just means us. So we're also on the same tree, Nimagna, we're drowning. We're drowning, Nimagna, Anisha Shochati Mushyamana. We're drifting, we're confused, we're grieving also. And Anisha, we feel that there's no one to help us. We feel helpless. So this is the lower bird, we can say. Yushtam yada pashyati anyam isham. When that bird, that lower bird, sees the higher bird, who is this higher bird? Isha, Ishvara, God, the Lord. However we want to understand that. It's not saying the witness, the sakshan, anything like that. It's very clearly the Isha. So, Yushtam yada pashyati anyamisham asya mahimanam edividishaka. And the majesty, and sees the majesty of that higher bird, then all grief disappears. Why does the Upanishad, which has very little to say about personal God, and even this term Isha, we had it in this Ishavasya Upanishad, right? Isha Upanishad this morning. Now we have it again here. Otherwise, we don't have much of this Ishwar, mostly Brahman. Not too much of this. Why do we have that here? Let me just read the whole translation. The individual soul on that same tree in the body remains drowned in misery, deluded, and feeling helpless. So it feels like there's no Isha, Anisha. Feels like there's no God, no one to help it. And it grieves, it suffers because of that. But when it sees the other, Yushtam Isham, the adorable Lord, not just some powerful creator or something, but in very devotional terms, the adorable Lord, and its glory and grandeur, it becomes perfectly free from sorrow. Now, Shankaracharya, in his commentary on Gita and the Upanishads, whenever this Ishvara term comes up and he doesn't like it, he's not happy with it, he'll say it means the controller of the senses. He won't take it as a personal God. He doesn't mind it here. He also goes along with this. Swami Vivekananda, he'll go along with that also. So, Shankaracharya, when it says Isha, it says the Lord of the whole universe. So he's also not taking that as the higher part of the individual self. He's taking this as, some cosmic sense, almost. And he could have said, like the rider in the chariot is the jiva. He could have said that. He said, no. He goes with this, the Lord of the whole universe. Now, when I take this, everybody knows what's meant by a paradigm shift. I don't know what it means exactly, but I have some sense that we're just, we shift to a different level and a way of looking at something which doesn't contradict anything before, just a different model that we can use to look at something. Is that a paradigm shift? We have scientists here?
It's like Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo, that also doesn't help me. Anyhow, I have some sense that this is a paradigm shift. That we're just, we found a different way of looking at something and a different analogy to use, a different model. Yeah, so it's something that we'll find that can resonate with us, just looking at it from a different point of view. So we're no longer going to associate this this witness simply with this highest level of mind, which we can. We can say that it's just that this one level of the mind is so pure that it's watching without judging or anything like that. That there's some transcendent, deeper cause or source of this witnessing consciousness. So this, from the Vedantic point of view, is not surprising. If this jiva is nothing but really the Atman, once it leaves the chariot, and if the Atman is really nothing but Brahman, then the witness can be both. We can look at it from both points of view. If seeing it as the jiva is just our own misconception, then we get rid of that misconception, and we can see it as that divine presence within. And we can understand that it's only the degree of reality we give to these divisive elements and these superimposition elements which make us make a distinction between jiva and Atman, between the individual self and the higher self, and also Atman and Brahman. That all the same. Just as the sleeper is really the dreamer, is really the actor within the dream. Who is watching the dream? Who is the witness in a dream? How do we remember the dream? Do we remember the dream because we watched it when we were there? Was the witness the one? Did it belong to the actor within the dream? Or does it belong to the dreamer, who's really the sleeper? It's a very interesting question. How do we remember a dream? Do we remember a dream because I saw it when I was in the dream? Or do we remember it because I had the dream? Is there any perception taking place in a dream? Do we really see there's no separate object? We don't. That observer in the dream, from the point of view of the dream, belongs to the actor. From the point of view of the sleeper, of the dreamer, belongs to the dreamer. From the point of view of the sleeper, belongs to the sleeper. But are they different? They're not different. There's a unity in all of these three. So we can also see it that way. Now, you remember the second verse that I read, we have these two words, yada pashyati, when the lower bird sees the higher bird. And this is also significant because the lower bird seeing the higher bird is from the point of view of ignorance. Or at least we can say pre-enlightenment. That's when the higher bird has forgotten itself and thinks that it's the lower bird. Until that lower bird realizes its oneness or gets into a state of union with the higher bird, we can speak in these dualistic terms. So when it sees that higher bird, that means that when I, as an individual, feel the presence of the divine within my heart, then I become free from grief. It doesn't mean that this is the ultimate truth, that there's some separation, that there really is a separate lower bird and a separate higher bird, or that they have an equal metaphysical value. Even if we say there is a lower self, that is constantly changing, and that will emerge in the higher one and become one with that. So this becomes a question of what is our state of mind? What is the sense of I that we have that allows the separation lower bird to higher bird? Sri Ramakrishna gives the illustration of a stick lying on the surface of a body of water. Or if you think in a swimming pool where you have to separate the shallow section from the deep section, they'll put a rope on top that way. Now, if somebody doesn't know better and they're looking from the top, they may think that this rope goes all the way down, that it separates one side of the water from the other side. It doesn't. You can swim right underneath it. So this rope gives a sense of apparent separation and differentiation between one side and the other. One side will be the lower self, the other side the higher self. One side will be the individual, the other side will be God. One side will be one individual and the other all other individuals. That means it's only the sense of ego, the sense of I, that makes us feel separate from each other and separate from God, or feel that there is a real lower self and a higher self, that separate from the active mind and the witness. So there's nothing absolute about that, but from this dualistic point of view, when we feel that sense of separation and we have the vision of God within, then we become free from grief and all of that. Now, Sri Ramakrishna adds another dimension to this, where he says that it's a choice that we have. That we may find that because of our own nature, we would rather feel a slight sense of separation to enjoy this divine communion, rather than dissolve this distinction and feel oneness. He quotes a song from a great Bengali poet and poet, saint, and devotee of the Divine Mother, Ram Prasad. He says, the song of Ram Prasad, he says, "Ami chini hote chai na ma, ami chini khete bhalobashi." He says, I don't want to become sugar, Mother. I want to taste sugar. I want to enjoy the taste of sugar. So I want to see that higher bird. I want to get closer and closer, of course, and see it. But if I merge in it, I won't get the joy of communion with that bird. So on some level, there's a choice at play, and some level it's a question of our nature and our personality. That way, how we look at this whole thing. Now, Swami Vivekananda, those who have read him know that he spoke some very strong words about the personal God, almost to the point where it's a fiction. He says that you've been searching all over for God here and there. It's your very own self. Very strong sometimes with things like that. So we would expect him to fall on the side of the witness is really your very own self, higher self. But he doesn't. He loves this idea that this is one of the nicest ways of looking at this personal God as this witness, capital W, witness. I'm going to read just a few statements that he made. He whom you are worshipping is unknown and are seeking. And the reason why it's so important is because then God is the closest of the closest. Not somewhere up in heaven that we just guess about and speculate about. Our very own self that we can feel and experience. So he whom you are worshipping as unknown and are seeking for throughout the universe has been with you all the time. You are living through him, and he is the eternal witness of the universe. All capital letters. Then, he whom all the Vedas worship, nay more, he who is always present in the eternal I. He existing, the whole universe exists. He is the light and life of the universe. If this I were not in you, and this curious thing, this I means the presence of the divine, not my ego. If this I were not in you, you would not see the sun, everything would be a dark mass. He shining, you see the world. He is the witness, the eternal witness of all knowledge. Whatever we know, we have to know in and through him. He is the essence of our own self. He is the essence of this ego, this I, and we cannot know anything excepting in and through that. Therefore, you have to know everything in and through Brahman. To know the chair, you have to know it in and through God. Thus, God is infinitely nearer to us than the chair, but yet he is infinitely higher. Neither known nor unknown. See, the witness can never be known. It's the knower. The self can never be an object of knowledge. Subject can never become the object. And yet we know it because we are that. We feel it intuitively. I am the knower. But we can't objectify it. We objectify it, we lose it. And we're the ones who are doing the objective. We're the ones who are watching again. So, neither known nor unknown. But the most known of all, our very own self. But something infinitely higher than either. He is yourself. He is yourself. Yes, think of these words. The self, the I and the you become merged here. He is yourself. This is the highest Vedanta, Dvaita Vedanta, the Tattvamasi. And yet, devotional. He is yourself, end quote. Who would live a second, who would breathe a second in this universe if that blessed one were not filling it? Because in and through him we breathe, in and through him we exist. Two more quotes. This is the whole history of mankind. Finer and finer becomes the veil. More and more of the light behind shines forth, for it is its nature to shine. It cannot be known. In vain we try to know it. Were it knowable, it would not be what it is, for it is the eternal subject. Knowledge is a limitation. Knowledge is objectifying. He is the eternal subject of everything. The eternal witness in this universe. Your own self. And the last quote. Can you thus limit him who is the substance of all knowledge? Him who is the Sakshi, the witness, without whom you cannot have any knowledge. Him who has no qualities, who is the witness of the whole universe, the witness in our own souls. How can you know him? By what means can you bind him up? If we think about it, if consciousness is impersonal, there's no I within this witnessing consciousness, then it's equally he, equally I, and equally beyond both. There's nothing personal about it. It's completely universal, completely impersonal. Every thought that we have of I is a thought. That means that it's present to this witnessing consciousness. The mirror is perfectly impersonal. Everything personal and particular about it is what stands before it. If this is the real nature of the self, then equally an I, equally a thou. It's a very beautiful way of understanding this highest Advaitic idea of oneness from this devotional point of view. Now, how do we utilize this concept of the witness? Whether we're very devotional, think of the God dwelling within, or whether we think that this is my higher self, it has to become practical, or else it's just theoretical knowledge. So there has to be some way to put this into practice, and I wanted to go through 4 different ways that we do it based on the 4 yogas. Okay? We're going to start with Karma Yoga. There are several important features of Karma Yoga. It can be done from a devotional point of view. We do everything as an offering to God. This is one way of performing Karma Yoga. Another way is by doing everything with the feeling that I am the observer. I'm not the agent of action, that action is taking place. And then one of the themes of Gita, of course, as this interplay between the body, the mind, and the senses on the one hand, and external objects on the other hand. And sometimes we feel this. We can feel this very strongly. Sometimes we're driving a car, and our mind is wandering a little bit, and we think, oh my goodness, I just went 3 or 4 blocks, I don't really remember that I was driving. Who was driving at that time? The mind and everything. Even when we're concentrating, we reach such a point of expertise that we know exactly with the rate of acceleration or deceleration in speed, and the angle that we have to turn, and how much of the wheel we have to turn so that we make the perfect turn. Okay? Automatically, it's like a machine is working, and sometimes we can just watch. We can just watch the mind. I'm very fond of doing woodworking. And I find that working with some tools in the shop, that mind can get into a certain state where there's such a calmness and an observing aspect of it that you're just watching the hands move. And there's a machine called a bandsaw. This bandsaw is meant to make curves in wood. So you can draw a line. And I used to think of it as a bandsaw yoga. Because what you have to do, you have to make sure that the blade of the saw never deviates from the curve in the line. So you have to keep shifting and doing like this, like that. And I find that at that time, we think the whole mind has to be concentrated on it. But that's the time when mind will be repeating the mantra. The japa could be going on very peacefully, calmly, and watching the whole thing. And just feeling I am the witness. Watching the whole thing. That's why Sri Krishna says, work with 25% of the mind, 75% of the mind keep on God. That we can really, and yeah, because most of the time we think 100% of the mind and it's really scattered all over the place. We think we're concentrated. With that 25%, we can do far more than we normally can. So, this is one way of putting into practice. That means that also we get rid of the sense of agency, we get rid of the sense of pride of what we've done, we get rid of the sense of wanting reward for things. It has lots of very nice benefits. So non-agency, non-attachment, we start to feel ourselves as the observer. All of these things are the result of that. Then, efficiency, we find that when we act, without getting too involved in it, with that little distance, that we're more efficient. We get things done in a nicer way. And the skillfulness, as Gita says, one of the definitions of yoga is karma sukoshalam, is skillfulness in work. So this will help us very much with developing concentration and skillfulness in everything we do, this feeling that we're the witness. Now, Bhakti Yoga. We saw, of course, before that we can feel this witness is the presence of the divine within. That we can be, if we're aware of this witnessing consciousnness, then we're in constant communion with God. And if you look at all of the hymns that we have these what's called dhyana mantras, these mantras used for meditation for Swami Krishna and the Holy Mother and Swamiji. They're all Hridaya Kamnavati, they're all dwelling within the lotus of the heart, within the cave of the heart. It's not thinking of them as far away or distant or something. Within, as pure consciousness, as pure awareness, as the witness. So we can feel that divine presence within. And as I said before, substitute this word Sakshit with this word Antaryami. This is our friend dwelling within, the divine communion, that the inner guide. Some people may say conscience. We have this. What is this sense of conscience we have? That deep within, something is telling us that this is the right thing to do. We can say there's some moral compass that we're born with, or we can say this is that divine presence within. So if we feel awareness of this witnessing consciousness, that means we're feeling the presence of God within from a devotional point of view. Then, Raja Yoga. This is another way of stilling the mind at the time of meditation, feeling ourselves to be the witness. When we sit for meditation, Swami says that first thing to do is, rather than try to still the mind, let the mind run around. Just observe it. Don't do anything. Feel yourself separate from the mind. We feel ourselves separate from the mind. If we watch it, then we're something separate from it. There's always the distinction between the seer and the seen, the knower and the known. Watch every thought as if it's just a little blip that goes across the screen of consciousness, or a bubble that comes up and disappears. Don't be attached to it. Let it come, let it go. I think I didn't invite it here. I'm not going to have it stay. I want it to go until the mind becomes a little bit calm. So no sense of ownership, no sense of agency. I am the witness. And he says if we do this, then we find that the mind automatically will start to get a little bit quiet. It won't get perfectly quiet because it doesn't like to get perfectly quiet. It's not the function of the mind is to make life miserable for us, not to help us in meditation. Yeah, like the monkey. Yeah, Swamiji says it's like a monkey that's drunk on wine and stung by a scorpion. and possessed by a demon. By the demon of pride. Yeah. And we can do this even with the ego, this I. The ego is really what we identify with. Every time this thought of I comes up, tell ourselves, this is just an idea. What is the ego? It's an idea. It's who I think that I am. I'm really the witness. But it's just an idea. Treat it like any other idea. Let it come, let it go. Don't give it too much importance. Swami Vivekananda, he says, the greatest help to spiritual life is meditation, dhyana. In meditation, we divest ourselves of all material conditions and feel our design nature. We do not depend upon any external help in meditation. The touch of the soul can paint the brightest color, even in the dingiest places. It can cast a fragrance over the vilest thing. It can make the wicked divine. And all enmity, all selfishness is effaced. The less the thought of the body, the better. For it is the body that drags us down. It is attachment, identification, which makes us miserable. That is the secret, to think that I am the spirit and not the body, and that the whole of this universe, with all its relations, with all its good and all its evils, is but a series of paintings, scenes on a canvas, of which I am the witness. So, in meditation, we have two opposite things. Sometimes we want to get the mind so merged in the object of meditation that we disappear into it. Other times we want to remain behind and feel ourselves to be the witness of watching the whole thing. Sometimes with a little play, we go back and forth. Sometimes the mind is concentrated. We're also aware that we're the witness of it at the same time. Now I want to finish with Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga, I want to take the very largest sense. Not that we're always analyzing, I'm not the body, not the mind, and the senses, but just whatever spiritual attitude that we want to take. And I want to refer to one special verse from the Bhagavad Gita. This verse says that who has conquered the world? Who is one who really has that self-control and everything? The one whose mind is fixed in sameness. Whose mind is fixed in firmness. That person has conquered the world here and now. Why? It says, Nirdosham hi samam Brahma. Because Brahman is Nirdosha. Brahman has no defects within it. It's perfect. Nirdosam hi samam Brahma. And Brahman is the same. No distinctions within it. Tasmat Brahmani testita. Therefore, they are established in Brahman. Now, what this verse seems to say, at least to me, is that if we want to realize our nature as one with the Brahman, this our perfection, our perfect nature, then we don't have to simply try to make this lower bird one with the higher bird. We try to make the lower bird take on the qualities of the higher bird. That means if the lower bird can also start feeling I am the witness, if the lower bird can also feel that everything is the same, can be established in sameness, if the lower bird can also feel its pure nature, then there's no distinction between the lower bird and the higher bird. Swami Krishna says pure mind and pure buddhi, pure intellect, and pure Atman are one and the same. We don't have to merge one into the other, although that's also one technique, he says, but just let the mind take the shape of Brahman. We have this from the Yoga Sutra, that the mind will take the shape of its object. If the mind takes the shape of Brahman, that means it becomes free from everything. Then it is one, then there's no distinction. It becomes one with Brahman. So, if we want to merge the mind in Brahman, we make the mind like Brahman. That means that however we understand Brahman, the perfection of it, especially as the witness, if we take the Brahman as the pure witness, then I try to be the witness. What does that mean? It means that I don't judge. It means that I don't get too involved in things. I don't feel that I am the agent of things. I don't react the way I used to react. I try to have some perspective and some distance and all of these things. So, we try to become the witness in whatever way we understand it, and that will get us established in this true nature of Brahman that way. So let me finish with one more quote from Swami. He says, "No breathing, no physical training of yoga, nothing is of any use until you reach to the idea, I am the witness." So forget about the real witness is God or something. Be the witness. So I am the witness. I'm the jnani. Everything is the self. So I want to be that. So you have to reach the idea, I am the witness. Say, when the tyrant hand is on your neck, I am the witness, I am the witness. Say, I am the spirit, nothing external can touch me. When evil thoughts arise, repeat that. Give that sledgehammer blow on their heads. I am the spirit, I am the witness, the ever-blessed. I have no reason to do, no reason to suffer. I have finished with everything. I am the witness. Okay, we need a break.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah, to sit.
Swami, the question there.
Yeah, we can have a question.
Yeah. Two things. One is in Gita, when you look at Shankara, Adi Shankara discusses, there is only Vivida Nishta, only two yogas are there, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. All this Bhakti Yoga, Raj Yoga, all these are there, mentioned about it. But when you say Bhakti Yoga, when you say Bhakti, whatever you sing or pray or rituals, that becomes a karma only. So the Karma Yoga includes the Bhakti Yoga. There is no separate Bhakti Yoga that Shankara discussed. This is number one. Number two, then you have another thing you are saying is, mind should take the form of a Brahman. Brahman has got no form.
Yeah.
Whenever I witness his form, how can my mind take the form of a Brahman?
By becoming empty.
Empty.
Yeah. When there are no thoughts in the mind, when the mind is still and calm, then there's no distinction. Yeah.
And other question also, the first sloka today we discussed, Isavashyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyandare. Isavashyam idam sarvam, what exists? Ishvara alone exists. So this lower bird and higher bird, everything is one only, there is no two. That is only in our thinking, in our teaching, and learning these two words. There is no two. Even when you say Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat, not even a dust particle can exist without Ishvara. Ishvara is Sarvavyapi. So where is question of one word, two words? They all merge into the one only. That alone exists. Ishvara alone exists.
Very good. Thank you.
I want to make a comment.
Yeah.
Gita said, as it said, only two yoga, karma yoga and jnana. If you look at the Shankara, it has only two paths on it. One is Pragati and the Nivrutti. So Pragati is the karma yoga, Nivrutti is jnana yoga. And even though Gita mentioned all of them, we come to the Mundakopanchad. Two birds are there. The upper bird is called Brahman. Lower bird is called Jiva.
Upper bird is called Isha.
Isha.
There is no mention of Brahman there. If you want to talk about what the Upanishad says, and Shankaracharya also doesn't say Brahman, he says Ishvara.
Ishvara.
Okay.
Ishvara and Brahman. Nirguna Brahma and Sagana Brahma. Let us put Ishvara and Sagana Brahma. Nirguna is a Nirguna Brahma. So, Nirguna Brahma is a Nimitta Karana and Ishvara is a Upadana Karana. Paramatma means is a Upadana Karana, Nimitta Karana. We cannot separate. So, Ishvara, even if you look at the Gita, wherever it says Mam, 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 and if you look at Shankara Bhashya, everywhere he mentioned Vasudeva, Vasudeva, Vasudeva. That means you can interpret this Vasudeva as a Nimitta Karanam or a Upadana Karanam. It is both one and the same. Like a clay and pot make and one and the same.
Very good. Thank you.
Guruji, you talked about 75% being preoccupied with God and 25% being focused on the hands.
Yeah.
What are the ways you practice that 75% preoccupation if it helps us?
I'm trying to raise the percentage little by little. One of the easiest and best ways is to get established in japa. To be repeating mantra throughout the day. But we have to keep reminding ourselves because this is abhyasa yoga. Constantly we forget. We have to form a habit. That's all. Abhyasa yoga. We have to form the habit. We have to keep trying to do it. Two things. One is the japa is helpful, and the other is we really can get established. If we can get established in this idea, I'm the witness. And that's also very helpful. But there are certain types of things that if our job entails reading and writing or talking on the phone, something like that, then of course forget japa. That you can't do it. Then it goes under the surface maybe. Those who work, in fact in many monasteries they'll do a lot of physical types of work because the mind is free. The hands will be working and everything. Other types of work we have to do it as an offering. And even then, sometimes we just, even while we're doing it, we forget. When the whole thing's done, say, now I offer everything at your feet.
Because we talk about big words like offering, witness, surrender, and half the time, 99% of the time, we have no clue what it means. What is witness itself is. And being established so firmly in the sense of I, and to remember and visualize and offer to something that I don't experientially know, it's just an intellectual speculation majority of the time. So the easier path I'm beginning to understand in my life is probably, taking me out of the equation is easier than imagining God half the time. Like sincerity in what we do, or selflessness, or even just like love.
Swami Vivekananda really emphasizes this idea of selflessness so much. He says God himself is selflessness. If we can eliminate self from everything, then half the job is done. Yeah, this is true. I'll very quickly tell you this story. You may know Swami tells of Narada. And when he goes to Narayana and he asks, who was your greatest devotee? And the whole long story, I'll just tell part of it, where he says, this certain village, there's a farmer, that he's my greatest devotee. And he goes and he says, what does the farmer do every morning? He goes to the shrine and says, oh Lord, may everything I do be done as an offering to you. And then he works all day long, hardly thinks of God. So busy with all his work, hard, tough work, and at the end comes back and says, please accept everything that I've done as an offering. Forgive me if I didn't remember you or that I offered you. So this Narada says, he's your greatest devotee. How is it possible? So then he says, okay, do one thing. I'll explain it, but do one thing first. You take this jar, fill it with oil, milk, whatever, and walk around the whole world, come back, and don't spill a single drop. So Narada does it. He comes back, he says, I didn't. And he says, how many times did you think? And he said, my God, oh mine. And he said, but see, this farmer, at least twice a day he thought of it. So, at least in the beginning of the day, the end of the day, I tried, I failed so many times. I tried to think divine thoughts and everything. Let everything that I did, let it all be done as well. Let there be no selfish motive in anything we do. Let there be a pure motive. This karma yoga doesn't mean that we don't have any goals or we don't try to accomplish things or anything. We do it with a very pure motive that it would be useful and helpful to other people and everything. No ulterior motive, and not claiming anything great for ourselves. If it turned out well, it was a privilege that we did something that could be offered. That type of attitude.
I have a 1 minute story if you allow me.
Okay,
that
sure.
has a great understanding that.
Yeah.
I had a grandfather, my mother's father, who was going to Tirupati once. And he was carrying 1,001 rupees in his under pocket to contribute in the hundi. And a thief pickpocketed on the bus he was traveling. And when he went to Tirupati, he realized there was no money in his pocket to offer. And I was in 8th grade, and he came home. And with a beautiful smile on his face, he said, Lord Venkateshwara was so impatient. He didn't allow me to come all the way to Tirupati to contribute. He came to the bus and took it, and then I thought my grandfather was so naive, how he was going to survive in this world. But now I realize that he covered the world with God.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Like when you are spending some time separately for meditation, you can be at a stage where you are sort of witnessing the silence. But how do you sustain that throughout the activities of the day?
Yeah, this is what I was saying, that there are certain types of activities today where we can't, where some things are conducive to it, some types of work are conducive to it. If we have to read some things, then the mind will be occupied with the reading. What we have to do is whenever the mind gets free, to have it automatically go back into that witnessing mood. Now, this is just a certain type of person will like this. Other people, they may have a different type of devotional attitude, or but this is something that's practiced much more by these Buddhist traditions nowadays. The mindfulness, that's their full practice, and it's just the result of habit. Every second they're supposed to ask themselves, am I thinking of something other than what I'm doing this moment? Every second they have to say, now I'm aware that I'm talking to you, now I'm aware I'm picking this up. Even just to verbalize it a little bit. I've never gone to these retreats, but I hear something like that it's just the result of long practice. It may be a little too dry for many people, but for some people it's a very helpful, positive thing. Otherwise we utilize it even for meditation. We may not like that. We may feel that I don't want to constantly be observing my meditation. I want to get immersed in the object of meditation, forget myself completely. The different moods that we have also. The topic for the last session today is be attached. Now, instantly everyone will think, what type of ridiculous statement is this? That we hear over and over and over again, be detached, right? So this will be the other side of it. This is not anything to contradict the very, very important role of detachment in spiritual life. There's no question that we need detachment, but perhaps we need a little attachment also. So that will be the theme of this talk, and also because we have certain misconceptions about detachment and misconceptions about desires. We can't have any desires, we can't have any attachments. We have to be able to use our power of discrimination, discernment, and sometimes decide that some are very positive desires and some are very positive attachments, and we have to know the difference in when to utilize them and when not to. So we'll try to deal with some of these things. So the first thing is, let's try to get rid of this typical and very simplistic formula that all attachment is bad and all detachment is good. And this will be a theme that we'll find in the writings of Swami Vivekananda. There are some times when detachment is a certain sign of dumbness and death and laziness. Posing as detachment, and there are certain times when engagement is just restlessness, too much of grudges and everything. So we have to be a little subtle in our understanding of these things. So I want to first look at some of the different ways we have of understanding this question of attachment by using 3 different pairs of concepts. The first one will be Vairagya and Anuraga. Vairagya typically we translate as renunciation, but I think dispassion is a better way. So dispassion, Anuraga will be the opposite, passion. So to look at this distinction between these two, and then to look at the distinction between Nivritti and Pravritti. We had reference to it earlier today. Nivritti, Pravritti. Nivritti means kind of withdrawing. Is the path of renunciation, the path of turning away from the world. Pravritti is the path of engagement. How we understand these two terms. And then the third will be something that we find in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, the distinction between Maya and Daya. Maya, we're not using in the philosophical sense of illusion or anything. Maya, the way it's used in Bengali and maybe other Indian languages, means attachment. Attachment or love, that way. Daya means the compassion and love for all beings. So the Maya would be restricted and limited to our own near and dear ones, and Daya would be some more expansive and universal feeling of love and compassion and fellow feeling. So I want to go through these different concepts and then give a few examples from the lives of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swamiji about the real nature of attachment and detachment. Vairagya and Anuraga both come from the same Sanskrit root, ranj. Ranj means to dye something, in particular to dye something red. Okay? And red always symbolizes passion. So from this ranj we get the word rakta, blood. Okay? Very passionate about something, blood will rush to the head and things like that. Rajas. So anything that has to do with passion, and especially this color red. The 3 gunas have their own colors. You know, the sattva is white, and rajas is red, and tamas is black. So it comes from ranj. Now with V means that we're separating ourselves from it. So V raga becomes vairagya, which means dispassion. So we're trying to separate ourselves from it. Anuraga means this passion for something, that we're very passionate about something. It comes to mean a very high type of spiritual love also is anuraga. So we have both of these terms, which come from this concept of dyeing. We have a cloth, and we want to dye a cloth in a certain liquid so that it will take the color there. The idea with vairagya is that we don't want to let this mind get mixed up with anything that will turn it to that bright red color. We want to keep the mind detached and concentrate on this idea of dispassion. Traditionally, this vairagya was the one quality that was essential for those who took to monastic life. That those who lacked any desire for family, for career, children, any of those things, that they felt some deep type of dispassion. So this vairagya, if we take this as just a negative thing, not passionate about anything, then it becomes really a very mediocre type of quality. There's nothing very special about it. Many people just aren't interested in something. This vairagya is a very strong, positive feeling that overcomes those who take to monastic life. It's essential. If they don't have it, generally the monastic life is very difficult for them. So this vairagya is something very, very positive. It shouldn't be taken as just a negative lack of interest in things. It's a very strong thing that has to be there. We see this in the life of all of the great saints that gave up everything in search of God, in search of realization. So let's look at the life of Buddha, how he had everything. He had a beautiful young wife, a son was born to him, he had the palace, he had all the luxuries and fine food and anything that anybody could possibly want. But this tremendous vairagya came into his life, that he had to find out the truth. He had to realize the truth in his own life, so he's willing to give up everything for that. The householders, devotees, also need a type of vairagya. And for them, generally it means living a life of moderation, living a life we're not running after too much of luxury and wealth and enjoyment and all of these things. It doesn't mean giving up everything. As Ramakrishna says, it means internal renunciation. That means that we can have all of possessions and things which are necessary, career, everything, but without this terrible type of attachment, so that if we lose something, we're miserable. That we understand everything has its role and everything in its place. This vairagya is especially important for meditation. When Arjuna asked Krishna how to control the mind, he says this mind seems to be impossible to control. Easier to control the wind than to control the mind. So, as Sri Krishna says, he gives two pieces of advice. The one is obvious, abhyasa yoga, that you have to keep practicing. But we can practice all of the time, and it won't be of any avail if the pull of the world is too strong. If the desire for enjoyment is too strong. If the desire for name and fame is too strong. So the second thing he says we need is vairagya. We need this dispassion. And we'll see that Sri Ramakrishna will add a third thing, and that is this anuraga. That if we simply keep pushing away these objects of desire, then we'll find the mind dwelling on them. We have to replace them. We have to replace it with something more appealing to us, so that we feel that we're not giving up anything of any great value, that we've given up the lesser, we've gotten something even greater. One of our early Swamis was told once that somebody said, "Oh, Swamiji, how great is your renunciation." He'd been living on nothing. He was in one of our Himalayan centers, the Shamlata, Swami Virajananda. living a very simple type of life, but a very joyful type of life. He was a wonderful soul. And he said, your renunciation is far greater than mine. So the householder was there. The householder said, what? How is that possible? I have every enjoyment in the world and everything, and he's living such a difficult type of life. So he said, what do you mean by that, Swami? And he said, what have I given up? I've given up this little mud puddle of the world. And what am I getting in return? I'm getting this greatness of God. And look at you. You've given up God for this little world. You've given up far more. Your renunciation is far greater than mine. Yeah. So this we can understand this in terms of replacement. Otherwise, if it's the mind is such that it reacts in the opposite way. We tell the child you can't have this, it means they want it even more. We say, well, this is even better than that. Say, oh, okay. Yeah. So it's a very nice psychological way of looking at it. I think we have a psychologist here. Okay. So this is why we see Swami Krishna that he emphasizes this idea of anuraga. So this idea of really immersing the mind in something very positive. Whatever our spiritual ideal is, we try to immerse the mind. So that means that we try to dye the mind, dye the cloth of the mind in the color of the divine. This is essentially what it means. And we have different methods of doing this, and I think it's very helpful to think in terms of the real process of dyeing cloth. Has anyone spent any time dyeing cloth? As monks, we do it all the time, believe it or not. We start out with white cloth. In the old days, it was actual gero amati, it was actual mud, the dirt that we use. Now they use permanent dye. But so we're experts at dyeing cloth. So there are 3 elements necessary if we want to have a successful dyeing job. Can anybody tell me what the 3 elements are?
Water, color, and heat. Water, color, and the heat.
One at a time. I can't do 3 things at once. Water. What's water? Huh?
Cold water. Cold water.
Water. How will that turn anything a color?
You put the color in it and then you have to heat it.
You have to heat it. Okay.
Salt.
Put the salt in it.
Okay.
And then stir it.
Yeah.
You need something that's blank, like a white piece of cloth.
Okay.
Pure.
Okay. Okay. So, yes. Yeah.
You need an agent that will help the color to stick to the cloth.
Okay. Quality of the dye. Okay. So the quality of the dye. Maybe some agent has to be there, but it has to be intense. We have to have put enough of the powder in, whatever it is. Huh? If it's too diluted, okay, it won't work. So the quality of the dye, that'll be number 1. Okay. Number 2 will be the quality of the cloth. Huh? So it should be white cloth, and it should be clean, it shouldn't be stained or already. Then third will be the length of time we allow it to sit in the dye. Huh? You dip it in, you pull it out. If you leave it in for a half hour, it'll come out bright orange. Huh? So the length of time that we keep in there. Now, Swami Krishna has a very interesting statement that he makes. He says the mind is like cloth that has just come back from the laundry. It'll take any color that you dye it in. So we'll get to that as the third. But let's start with the first 2. What does it mean, the intensity of the dye? Our yearning, the intensity of our thought when we're sitting for meditation, the intensity of our prayer, all of these things. So this will be one factor. Then, length of time. The length of time is critical for two reasons. One is that it takes time for the mind to soak up the color. Second thing is, it's an indication of our seriousness. Some people may say that, oh, if I sit for 5 minutes concentrated, it's better than a half hour with the mind wandering. It's half true. It's only half true. Because if we're willing to dedicate that extra half hour, it means that it's a high priority for us. It means that it's something of value to us. If you see somebody who's spending half the day in the shrine room, then you know that this is, even if the mind is wandering, still it's soaking up something there. Now the third one, the mind. If the mind has to be perfectly clean and perfectly pure before it takes the die, then most of us will feel that there's not too much chance. Now, this is where we get this tremendous statement of Sri Ramakrishna, that we shouldn't think of the mind as being impure. We should think of the mind as already in the condition where it can take the die. Now, if we say, well, I know my mind is impure, then what's really happening is that the dying agent of the divine has a double-acting power, that it will clean the cloth and dye it at one and the same time. So this is a special dispensation, or whatever you want to say, of Sri Ramakrishna, that if we wait until the mind is pure before we sit for meditation, then forget it. There's a very nice verse, the Swami Atmajnanananda, I've mentioned him several times, I don't know why, that he used to say, Ya ichchati harim smartum vyaparastagaterati samudha. No, I think I have it somewhere. Anyhow, it says, the fool who thinks that he will think of God after all of his work is done. Then Santa Kallole, that snatum ichchati dormati, that he's like the fool who thinks I'll go for a bath in the ocean after the waves subside. Yeah, nice verse. So it never happens. So we have to dive in. Now, how do we do these things? To increase this intensity, we have to dive deep in spiritual life. There's a Dubdas, Sri Ramakrishna loved this idea, dive deep. He said all of the gems are at the bottom of the ocean. You simply swim at the surface, you won't get anything. You have to dive all the way to the bottom. How do we do this? This is very, very practical advice. Sri Ramakrishna gives it over and over and over again. Number one, holy company. Yeah, nothing else. He doesn't, and he gives us this so many times. He always says, or almost always says, this is the first thing. Because automatically we pick up something. We feel that vairagya, we feel that longing for God, we feel that joy of divine communion, we feel something, some direct transmission, we get something tangible, we get some conviction, we see, this is really possible, we see that these are the fruits of a life of meditation, oh, how peaceful and how calm. So this holy company is tremendously important. Second, he says, go into solitude every once in a while. Even a day or 2 days or 3 days, doesn't matter. Spend some time completely alone. Do nothing but have spiritual thought, read some spiritual books, do your meditation, your prayer and everything. Be free from all other thoughts and botherations and encumbrances. Experience yourself just without any outside interference. And also, when we spend time in solitude, we begin to realize ourselves as pure consciousness. We begin to feel. Otherwise, we see ourselves as others see us. This very psychological point, that this sense of identification we have with the body is mostly because other people see us as a body. If we spend time by ourselves, a long time in solitude, we start to forget almost that we have a physical presence in the world. We feel that we're just a center of consciousness. I used to experiment with this. I like to live alone. I went through a period of life where I really loved solitude, and I traveled through India for a long time by myself, and without mixing with people too much, it's almost like solitude. And walking down the street, you almost feel like you're not there. You just kind of disappear. It's a very interesting thing. And I decided, I lived for 1 year in just a couple of rooms in a small house. And I decided I won't have any mirrors in the room. So I went that year without really, there were times, of course, I saw it in general, without seeing a reflection of myself. See, we say of myself. It really means a reflection of the body. And the whole mind changes. You start to feel yourself, understand what it means to be the witness and everything. So, solitude, that's the second thing. Then, he says, constant remembrance. And this is where I give Leela Chintana comes in. This thinking of the divine play. So this is more for the devotee, of course, and this is done very nicely in some traditions, especially Vaishnava tradition, Christian tradition. There are people who constantly do Bible study every day. They're thinking of different incidents in the life of Christ from the New Testament. Very, very helpful. The whole day can pass that way. The Vaishnavas, some of them the whole day thinking about baby Krishna and everything. So this is also something very helpful. And where we live, surround ourselves with holy pictures, do reading, all of this. Devotees of Swami Krishna, the more you can read from this gospel of Swami Krishna, the whole mind will just get so attracted that you find the whole life you're living there. People may say that, where do you live? Oh, I live in Washington, D.C. But for me, no, I live in Dakshineshwar. I live in Thakur's room. Whole mind, this thing, we feel that. So this brings us to another point, pilgrimage. It's very helpful to go to these places. If in our meditation we want to feel that we're picturing Krishna playing with the gopis, we go to Vrindavan, we see these places. We want to feel that we're sitting at the feet of Swami Krishna, we go to his room, we sit there. We look around, we observe everything very carefully, we sit for meditation, these things come into our mind, then a little intensity comes with all of this. So even this pilgrimage, these things are very helpful. Anything that inspires us, singing devotional songs, listening to devotional music, listening to now so many YouTube lectures and all of these things. Okay, that's intensity. Time factor I mentioned, that we have to give it enough time. Very often, I find personally at least, that the mind will get quiet only at the very end of meditation. That if I sit for, say, half an hour, and the mind is wandering the whole time, and then I get up, then that half hour, not wasted, but half wasted. If I sit for 45 minutes, and the last 15 minutes the mind gets a little concentrated, then the first half hour was valuable. It did its work. It allowed me to be concentrated at the end. If we don't give enough time, then we may miss out on all of the advantages that come at the end of that.
So Swamiji, how do we prevent falling asleep during meditation?
No, this is a very serious problem. This is called, there are two things. One, we actually fall asleep. The other is called laya. Laya is, we're not really sleeping, but we get into kind of stupor. Yeah, where, a half hour pass, I don't really remember thinking of anything like that. It's not samadhi. You may think it is. It's not that. We have to first of all make sure we don't fall into the habit. I've seen people that they'll sit for meditation, within a few seconds they're sleeping. No, seriously. Okay, now there are some very practical things that can be done. That first of all, I cheat a little bit. I have a cup of strong tea in the morning before I sit for meditation. A little bit of cheating. And I read a little bit And I take a shower every morning first. So I make sure that I'm fresh, that I'm up and everything, so I'm not going directly from sleep to meditation. So that may take me a full hour by the time I sit for meditation. I've been up, I'm reading some holy book, I'm having a cup of tea, the mind is getting prepared a little bit. Now, we sit for meditation, and we find that we're falling asleep. I'll tell you the story of Latu Maharaj. This is Latu Maharaj. He got caught sleeping one time at a very inauspicious hour. That Sri Ramakrishna said, "Where is Latu?" And then somebody said, "He's sleeping now, it's time for meditation." It must have been just as the sun went down, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, something like that. So he said, "Call him to me." So Sri Ramakrishna gave him a good scolding. That if you spend the whole night sleeping in meditation, when will you do your spiritual practice? Not in sleeping in meditation, but sleeping. So this Latu Maharaj said, "I determined then and there that I will never sleep anymore at nighttime." Yeah. So he said, "What happened? I sat for meditation and I got drowsy." He said, "I got up. I threw some cold water in my face. I got drowsy. I got up. I slapped myself. I walked back and forth." He said, "The whole night doing all of these different things, I passed. Then the next night it was a little easier. And he did that his whole life. He would just snatch a little sleep during the morning or afternoon or something, but otherwise he did that his whole life." Now, some of our Swamis will say that you really start to fall asleep, open your eyes, look at the holy picture. If you're meditating on whatever aspect of God you do, you have the picture there, do it with your eyes open for some time. It's a compromise. It's not exactly what we're trying to do in meditation, but it's better than just sleeping. So we have different things we can do. Some people will even do a walking meditation. They can get up and walk back and forth a little bit. If we really want to break this habit of falling asleep, then we can do these different things. They're, as I say, it's not the ideal, it's not the highest type of meditation, but still, it's better. For some people, it's simple as saying that when I fall asleep, then I start doing japa, and I'll do it with a rosary, with a mala. That also engages the body and the hand enough to keep the mind from falling asleep. So,
what are your thoughts? Some people say it's not even physical; it's just the ego itself not willing to cooperate with you to meditate and to advance spiritually.
That may be part of it. I mean, this ego also may manifest in other ways, not falling asleep, but just filling the mind with contrary thoughts. So this mind is a rascal. It'll do all sorts of things. Mind, ego, yeah. Anyhow, we have to struggle in the beginning, but we have to avoid this tendency to fall asleep right away, because it becomes the habit is very hard to break.
What about the music they have for meditation?
You can try it. Everybody is a little different. For some people it may be a distraction, for some people it may be helpful. It may put some people to sleep, it may keep some people awake. If it's helpful, there's no harm. Almost anything is better than just falling asleep. Yes?
What's wrong with doing 2 or 3 things at the same time?
With doing 2 or 3 things?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. We can open our eyes, we can throw cold water, we can walk, we can play music, we can do all of it. No harm. Yeah.
In sleep, they say, in Vedanta they say, the sleep is a competitor of meditation.
Yes, and remember all things, to do all the things it's not supposed to do. So it depends. If Thomas is the problem with the mind, it'll be the first, but this it'll be the second. Okay, let me move on to Pravriti and Nivritti. Pravriti has a very negative connotation in Vedanta, because it is generally associated with not just engagement in the world, but involvement in the world and attachment to the world. So generally this Nivritti Marga is always praised. This is withdrawing from the world. Now this becomes a problem when this tendency to withdraw comes from laziness, or it comes from fear, and all sorts of other things. But if we're talking about this tendency of the mind to go outward, pravritti, it has that meaning, then we have to try to stop that. And this nivritti means that we want to realize that divine presence within the heart. We want to turn the mind inward. So it goes very well with this idea of vairagya. But we'll find that pravritti, if we look at it as a path of karma yoga, and engagement in the world is very important and necessary, especially for the householder. And Sri Krishna is constantly urging Arjuna to follow this path of pravritti, that this is for the kshatriya, this is the path for him, that yudhyasva vigadadvara, that fight in this battle, but without feverishness. So this pravritti, this line gets a little blurred. The very early tradition is very clear. The nivritti is highly praised, and it's the monastic tradition, sannyasa tradition. Then in Gita, we find that the pravritti will be for a certain type, especially the kshatriya, someone who has to fight in the battle. Nivritti, so Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, you want to follow this nivritti marga? You want to flee from battle and beg your food and pretend that you're a big shot monk? You can't do that. You have to follow pravritti, but without attachment. So then we find that the distinction starts to blur a little bit. Do it, as I say, vigada dvaraha, free from this feverishness of mind. Now, Swami Vivekananda goes one step further. He says for the monks also need to be engaged in the action. Pravritti, nivritti, both, to combine them. And this is why the monks of our order do so much of social service work and engage with the community and run orphanages and schools and colleges and do relief work, famine relief and flood relief and everything. Because he understood that not everyone is qualified for a strict life of meditation. And this was very beneficial to, not just to society, but for the monks themselves. That this karma yoga, the real benefit of karma yoga is purification of the heart. And if we can do it in a selfless manner and do it work as worship, and serve others, seeing God in them. He used to say that this is the highest worship of God, that service to living beings is the highest worship of Shiva. Shiva gives this worship of the service of Jivas is the highest worship of Shiva. So he instituted this not just as a way of purifying the heart and getting rid of all of bad karma, but of learning to see God dwelling in all beings and practicing self-sacrifice. So this became a very important part of our monastic tradition. Now, last one, Maya and Daya. Maya and Daya are not diametrically opposed. One, as Maya Sri Ramakrishna used to say, it's not a bad thing. If we have very great love and affection for our near and dear ones, our own family members or our community members or members of our own religion, something like that, that is a good thing, but it's limited and restricted. Daya means that same love we have for our near and dear ones, we have for everyone in the world, regardless, without making any distinction. This human mind is funny that suppose there's a plane crash. We read all of the names in the plane crash. Suppose we're from a certain community. We're Bengalis, okay? We go through the list, say, oh, Chatterjee, oh, one Mitra, See how it affects us that way. Not just Bengali, it's just off the top of my head. Like that. If any tragedy happens anywhere, we have that same feeling, what a horrible thing. Then we're growing in Daya. This Swami Vivekananda, no matter where anything happened, if he heard an earthquake takes place anywhere in the world, then he would feel that deep within. He felt that this is that same sightedness that we read about it in Gita. This is that Daya. So this, we have to try to not replace one, but to expand. We have to expand that. So we have these different ways of dealing with this problem of attachment. This classical idea of dispassion. We have our vairagya, coupled with this nivritti, withdrawing from the world. A little bit of the old style. And as I say, these were both considered to be important for the very traditional sadhu life of the wandering monk in those old days. Sri Ramakrishna didn't mind this, but he didn't think of this as the highest type of ideal. Did we lose him? Okay. Very often, some of his disciples would express their distaste for the world, and they would get a little scolding. And he would say, "No, if you simply have this negative attitude towards everything, then it'll pull you in." He asked one of his disciples, "Whom do you love?" And he said, "I don't love anyone." And he said, "Oh, what a dry fellow." He was thinking, Thakur would say, what detachment, how wonderful. But he said just the opposite. And one of them was showing, he's a future monk, he was showing some disdain for women, that, the object of temptation, this and that. He said, "What are you talking about? See them as the divine embodiment of the Divine Mother. They take the positive side of things that way." So, Sri Ramakrishna did not like this nivritti in the sense of fear of the world, withdrawing, always afraid of being attached to things. He used to say, I used to pray to the Mother, "Mother, don't make me a dry sadhu." Yeah. He had a conversation with this one Pandit, Shasadhar, a very nice conversation. He said, the rishis of old had very timid natures. They were easily frightened. Do you know their attitude? It was this: let me somehow get my own salvation. Who cares for others? A hollow piece of driftwood somehow manages to float, but it sinks, even if a bird sits on it. But Narada and sages of his kind are like a huge log that not only can float across to the other shore, but can carry many animals and other creatures across. Teachers like Narada belong to the class of the Vijnani. They were much more courageous than the other rishis. They are like an expert satranja player, a dice player. You must have noticed how he shouts as he throws the dice. What do I want? 6. No, 5. Here is a 5. And every time he throws the dice, he gets the number he wants. He is such a clever player. So, for Sri Ramakrishna, this nivritti, this withdrawing from the world, was not the ideal that he had, especially if it came out of fear, and fear of attachment that way. He had his own teachings of how to live in the world without attachment. Some of them are very, very helpful. To me, one of the most important is this attitude of the maid servant in the rich man's house. He repeats this many, many times, that very often a very wealthy person, in this country of course also, but in Calcutta at that time, that they'll engage a woman from the nearby village who doesn't have much money to come and to be a nanny, basically, to help raise the children, to cook and clean and do everything like that. And they'll take the kids out for a walk and then play with them in the park and everything. And they'll get together among themselves. There'll be lots of them. Sometimes today you can see, if you go to a playground, you'll see all these women there with their little kids, and none of them are not their own kids. They'll be nannies, if it's a wealthy neighborhood like that. And they'll talk among themselves. Oh, did you see what my Hari did? How cute he was today. Did you see my Shibu? What he said? It was so cute. And now we painted our house, and this everything is my, or our house, all of this. But he says, deep down, she knows that it's not her Hari, it's not her child, it's not her house. None of it belongs to her. She has her own house in the country, her own family, everything there. That she's only working as if, trying to show that same love that she would, as if they were her own children, but she knows that they're not. They don't belong to her. So he said, live in the world like the maid servant in the rich man's house. that we give everything its due respect and attention and love and everything, but no attachment, knowing it doesn't belong to us. And our real home is with God. Real home is someplace else. So this is that one example, the maidservant example. Then okay. Now, suppose that I tell somebody, as a young child, I think, raise this child as if this child is not really your own child. Child belongs to God. They say, what are you, crazy? After going through labor pains and all of that, this is my child. They'll say, I won't be a hypocrite. How can I think that there's such a strong sense of attachment, mother to the child. Father to a certain extent, mother more. Child comes out of her body after all. So very strong soul. Sri Ramakrishna would say, okay, then see God within the child. So this is the other thing. Raise that child, look upon that child the way Mother Yashoda looked upon the baby Gopal. So feel that this is a type of worship. That this will also change that type of attachment and everything. Now, this will be the last part of this. If we feel that it's impossible to get rid of all of this attachment, that we're fooling ourselves and everything, and we really think that attachment is a bad thing, then we can turn to the lives of Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother and Swamiji and see what type of example we find there. What type of detachment did they have? What type of withdrawal from the world did they have? Or what type of attachment and love did they have? And we'll find, if we're very objective observers, that you won't find three people who were more attached than the three of them. This tremendous power of attachment that they had, but not the same as worldly attachment. This will be very helpful if we understand this very interesting distinction that we have. Let's start with Swami Vivekananda. He was so attached to some of his disciples and to his mother in particular. Now, the sadhu is not supposed to care about mother, father, anything like that. Traditionally, they leave home. If they want, after 12 years, they can go and see them again. He wasn't like that. His whole life, he said, I've caused nothing but misery to my mother. Because he was the eldest child, after his father died, it was up to him to look after the family. He wasn't able to do that. They suffered so much, and he really felt at the end of his life that he had no obligation left but to serve his mother, to take her on pilgrimage, to build a little hut. He had a plan that he would just spend his last days living in a little hut with his mother. He had so much love for his mother. Some of his disciples, he had one disciple, J.J. Goodwin. He was an Englishman. He's the one who took down all of his lectures in shorthand. And very devoted to Swamiji. He came to India with him, and he was in South India, and he came down with some fever or something. His body wasn't prepared for it, and he died. And Swamiji was so distraught that somebody said to him, perhaps it was God's will that Goodwin died in India, something like that. And Swamiji said that if it was the will of God, if it was God who took my Goodwin from me, then is it not my duty and obligation to fight such a God? Yeah, for taking my beloved Goodwin. Yeah. So we see the attachment that Swamiji had to everyone and everything. As I said before, if he heard of any disaster anywhere in the world, he was miserable. He couldn't sleep. He was beside himself. He was so identified with everyone, all of human nature, that you won't find anybody with that type of attachment. And yet, none of it was personal. None of it was ego-based. And even if it meant suffering for him, that suffering was a type of universal oneness with everyone. there'll be a certain type of transcendent, I won't say joy, but some type of ecstatic feeling if we can really feel the joys and sorrows of the whole world. So this is how Swamiji had this attachment, and at the same time, it was a transcendent type of attachment. And of course, this attachment for Sri Ramakrishna and for Holy Mother and for spiritual life and for the work of the order, all of that was really beyond our comprehension. Now, Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, we haven't spoken too much about her. Her specialty was attachment. So attached to each and every one of her children. She looked upon everyone as her own child. So this, for her, there was no Maya, because she made no distinction. Whoever came was like her own child. When several of the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna passed away before she did, and she was so distraught. They were really especially, because they were, we call them a Shantan, the children, Thakur's monastic children. They were especially like her children. She had this attachment to one niece by the name of Radhu. Then people said, Mother, how could you be so attached? And she said that this is a trick of Sri Ramakrishna. In order to keep my mind down to the world, he created this yoga Maya, this Maya for me, this attachment to Radhu. But her attachment was unique in the sense that it came from her feeling of universal motherhood. Everyone was her child. So that tremendous attachment also has a spiritual basis, not an ego basis that way. And last but not least is Sri Ramakrishna. How attached he was to his disciples, Narendra, who's our Swami Vivekananda, that he said, if this Narendra, if he doesn't visit me for a few days, I feel as if my heart, in India they have something called a Ganesha. Do they call it that in other parts? In Bengal. That when you bathe, it's a little towel, but not really a towel, like a cloth. It's something. And then you dip it, and then you dry it out and you wring it out. He said, I felt like my heart was being wrung out, like a wet kamcha that way. He had a nephew by the name of Akshay. This Akshay was practically raised by Sri Ramakrishna. It was a very unusual thing. His elder brother, first of all, his wife died in childbirth, and second of all, he had some premonition that this child would not live that long. So he refused to get attached to the child. Already lost his wife. So the child stayed in the village, and he was in Calcutta, and Sri Ramakrishna was just growing up. He was 13, 14, 15 at that time. So he practically raised him. And he was a very wonderful child. Thakur became very attached to him. When he got a little bit older, he came to Calcutta, to Dakshineshwar, to be a priest in the temple, so stayed where Sri Ramakrishna was. And again came down with fever. In those days, in India especially, with the tropical conditions and malaria and all sorts of diseases and not much modern medicine, it was very common that people wouldn't survive these things, so he died. Now, Sri Ramakrishna said that when I saw that Akshay had died, I saw the soul left the body as if the sword being pulled out of its sheath, that it was just the body that died, nothing happened to him. And I felt ecstatic and everything. He said, but the next day, I felt such pain at the loss of Akshay that I couldn't control my tears, and again the heart being wrung like the wet cloth and all of that. So he had this tremendous attachment, but what was the cause of his attachment? He saw God dwelling in all of them. He said to Narendra, Swami Vivekananda, he said, you know why I love you? Because I see Narayana dwelling within you. If for 1 second I don't see that, then I won't be able to bear it, even to see your face. It won't mean anything. So he had this attachment based on this realization of the indwelling presence of God within all beings. So what we learn from this is that these great souls also can have very human hearts, and they can have this type of attachment that is not the type of attachment we have. We want to have an attachment that will not bind us. We want to have an attachment, first of all, we want to have an attachment to spiritual life, an attachment to the very higher things. And we want our attachment to loved ones to be and one that doesn't bind us. To freely love them, to be able to let go also. When I was growing up, my mother used to say, we give our children roots and we give them wings. So that type of feeling, to be able to let go also. But what we really find with all of this, and the point of this, is that we shouldn't be afraid of attachment. We have to understand the nature of it, and we have to see how important it is to be passionate about things. Whatever it is, whether it's our career, whether it's our family, to be passionate without attachment. So I'm going to finish here with, again, a very nice quote from Swami Vivekananda. This was from a lecture, Work and Its Secret. Attachment is the source of all our pleasures now. We are attached to our friends, to our relatives. We are attached to our intellectual and spiritual works. We are attached to external objects so that we get pleasure from them. What, again, brings misery but this very attachment? We have to detach ourselves to earn joy. If only we had the power to detach ourselves at will, there would not be any misery. That man alone will be able to get the best of nature, who, having the power of attaching himself to a thing with all his energy, has also the power to detach himself when he should do so. The difficulty is that there must be as much power of attachment as that of detachment. There are people who are never attracted by anything. They can never love. They are hard-hearted and apathetic. They escape most of the miseries of life. But the wall never feels misery. The wall never loves, is never hurt. But it is the wall after all. Surely it is better to be attached and caught than to be a wall. Therefore, the person who never loves, who is hard and stony, escaping most of the miseries of life, escapes also its joys. We do not want that. That is weakness, that is death. That soul has not been awakened, that never feels weakness, never feels misery. That is a callous state. We do not want that. At the same time, we not only want this mighty power of love, this mighty power of attachment, the power of throwing our whole soul upon a single object, losing ourselves and letting ourselves be annihilated, as it were, for other souls, which is the power of the gods. But we want to be higher even than the gods. The perfect person can put his whole soul upon that one point of love, yet he is unattached. So we have a few minutes if anybody wants to ask anything.
Can you tell us a little bit about that transition from Maya to Daya?
Yes.
Because it's easy to start with Maya.
This is actually, we want to start with Maya. If we don't learn to love our near and dear ones, then I think that there part of it is just our understanding. Part of it is we actually have to mix with people. Intellectually, we can say yes, that I feel oneness with people everywhere, and yet, unless we say people of different religions, how often have we gone to a church or a mosque or a temple with people of other religions? Have we eaten with them? Have we mixed with them? Have we learned their language? All of this. Sometimes we actually have to do, as Ramakrishna said, that I practiced all of the religions, I mixed with all the people, I learned to see the world through their eyes. So this is the practical side of it. Philosophically, we can say yes, God dwells equally within all beings. But from a practical point of view, I had the tremendous blessing of traveling all through Europe and North Africa and Asia, a long trip before I got to India. And through Southeast Asia, I did a lot of traveling when I was young. I loved to see different cultures and everything. And I found wherever I went that if I mixed with the people, if I learned a little bit of the language, if I read about them, I knew about their culture, I shared food with them, that I felt a certain oneness with them that transcended culture. So I think if you want to really, from the heart answer, is that we have to go out of our way to know the other people. Otherwise they remain strangers and it's just big talk. Yes, I feel oneness with everyone. I love all people of all countries and everything. If we've been to these places, right? And we mix with them, learn a little of the language. Every place I went, I would buy one of these little tourist books so you can learn phrases. Huh? No, it's a nice thing, yeah. And just so if you go to somebody and you say a few words in their own language, what a difference it makes. How happy they are. And just living with different people in a very open-minded way. I don't feel that anybody is a stranger. This is just my nature, I guess. I never felt any barriers of culture. But a lot of it came through experience. And we have to be open to people. We have to break bread with them sometimes. Eat with them. Walk in their shoes a little bit. Understand them. And we find that everybody has the same desire to get some contentment out of life, some joy, find some meaning and value in life. And sometimes the different cultures exert influences that may skew things a little bit from our point of view and everything, but deep down we find that we have more things in common than we have different from other people. So even forget about the God dwelling within all, or everyone is divine, all of that. Just from the point of being a human being, that we share so many things in common. We're all children of the same divinity, something like that. That is very, very helpful. But we have to learn to not be too insular, too insulated, to learn to mix with people. Service, yeah. To serve with others, go into their community. Yes?
How can you advise us how to show daya to somebody who is not good people, who are flaws?
Yeah, can you repeat it so that others can hear also?
Yeah, can you advise us how to practice daya towards somebody, towards people who are flaws, who don't treat us well?
Yeah. Now, Swami Krishna, he was also a very practical man. He said that God dwells within all the beings, even within the tiger. But you don't embrace the tiger in that.